The day my son told me he wanted my paycheck sent to his account, the kettle hadn't even finished singing. "Starting next month, Mom," Bryce said, sliding his mug across my kitchen table like he owned the wood grain. "We'll route your salary to me. I'll cover your bills. You won't have to worry about a thing." And worry, as if it were a hobby of mine. As if I hadn't carried both of us through 34 winters on worry's back. The kettle clicked off. I poured, steady, letting the steam fog the window where the afternoon light came in. Thin and honest. Bryce didn't like honest light. He preferred dim rooms and confident sentences, places where edges blur and words do the pushing he doesn't want to do with his hands. "For your own good," he added, softer, like kindness could salt the wound he'd just opened. "My name is Eleanor Johnson, but he calls me Ellie when he wants something to feel smaller." I watched his mouth shape reasons he thought sounded responsible. Automation, convenience, security, polite vocabulary laid over a hungry appetite. "I trust you," I said, and set his tea in front of him. The cup clinked, porcelain on wood, a tiny gavel striking. His smile bloomed fast, too fast, like a stain spreading through fabric. He leaned over, kissed my forehead the way people kiss trophies after a win, then checked his phone while talking through the next steps. Bank forms, signatures, power of attorney, hidden in fine print and tone. I nodded in the right places. I even smiled once when he called me Mama, a word he drags out when he believes the door is already open. By evening, he returned with his wife. Fridays had become their ritual. Arrive hungry, leave satisfied, offer no help carrying plates. I used to mistake it for company. Now I saw it for what it was, a weekly withdrawal that never hit the ledger. The key I'd given him turned in my lock. The door opened, and then the scream. Not mine, his. Where the sofa had been, there was floor. Where the television had glowed, there was a pale rectangle of dust. The shelves were bare except for a single object I had left on purpose. My husband's brass compass, face up, needle steady, north, unwavering. "Mom," Bryce burst into the kitchen, color drained. I folded my dish towel, slow. "Sold," I said, gentle as steam. "Thought I should have cash on hand since you'll be managing my finances." His face flushed a violent red. "You sold our things without asking? Our?" The word traveled the room and hung between us like a cracked chandelier. His wife stepped in, eyes sharp enough to peel fruit. "This is selfish, Ellie. We come every week to check on you. It is not Feder and Din." "They come every week to eat dinner you don't pay for," I did not say. "How are we supposed to be comfortable here?" Bryce snapped. "Not how are you, Mom? How are we?" As if my home were a lobby he rented by entitlement. I let silence do the heavy lifting. Years in kitchens teach a woman timing, when to stir, when to wait, when to turn down the heat, and let truth reduce to something undeniable. "You'll sign the papers Monday," he said at last, voice flat, the salesman closing. "Don't do anything stupid. A woman your age, alone. Things can go badly." They left on a gust of offended air, doors rebuking their own hinges. I stood in the square of empty light, where a television used to hum lies, and felt something slide into place inside me, clean as a lock, engaging. He didn't know I hadn't sold the furniture for money. I'd sold it for clarity. I picked up the compass, the needle quiet as conviction, and set it in the center of the cleared room. North is north whether a boy believes in it or not. I made tea for one and watched the window turn from late gold to honest dark, counting not what I'd lost, but what I'd finally found, my direction. The night they left, the quiet stayed behind like a living thing. It moved through the rooms, exploring the empty spaces where furniture used to stand. Every corner felt like a scar, not painful, just healed over, stiff and unmoving. I sat in the kitchen with the compass in front of me and realized how light a house can feel when it's been emptied of everything that isn't love. For years, I thought noise meant life. The clatter of dishes, the hum of the television, the low, tired voice of a son saying, "I'm busy, Mom." But noise is easy. Silence is honest. It tells you what's gone missing without mercy. I thought about Bryce's words, "for your own good." That phrase had been echoing through my life since he was a boy. When he dropped out of church, it was for his own good. When he married a woman who treated me like the help, it was for his own good. And now, taking my money was apparently another act of devotion. I used to believe him, because believing was easier than admitting that love had turned into control. I walked through the house barefoot, letting my heels find the cold spots in the floor. Where the couch once sat was a rectangle of brighter wood, lighter from years of shadow. I traced the edges with my fingers, as if touching the outline of the life I'd just erased. On the kitchen counter sat the papers Bryce had left behind. Power of attorney, access to all my accounts. My signature line waiting like a trap. I placed a teacup over the line, not to hide it, but to mark it. A promise to myself. Never again. I slept in my husband's old recliner that night, surrounded by quiet. I expected loneliness to come knocking, but it didn't. Instead came something else, a pulse, a whisper, the faint hum of a woman waking up after decades of sleepwalking through motherhood. By morning, the world outside was glazed with frost. I brewed coffee, dressed slowly, and looked around the bare room. I didn't see loss. I saw evidence. Every missing chair, every empty shelf, was proof that I could start over if I needed to. I picked up the compass again. The needle pointed north, steady and patient. I smiled. Bryce thought he had cornered me, but he had only given me space. Space to think, to act, to reclaim everything that had always been mine. Not the furniture, not the money, but my power to choose. And I already knew my next move. Before all of this, before the empty rooms, before the cold tea and signed betrayals, there was love, or something that wore its costume. Bryce was born on a stormy night 34 years ago. The doctor had said his heartbeat was strong, that he was a fighter. I believed him. I thought I was raising a man who would fight for me, not against me. His father left when Bryce was 2. He said he needed to find himself. I told him I hoped he'd stay lost, and I raised that boy alone. I worked mornings in an office typing other people's letters and nights, cleaning the very floors their shoes dirtied. I slept 4 hours a night for 20 years. Every paycheck was stretched until it screamed rent, food, shoes, school trips, college. When Bryce wanted those $100 sneakers the other kids had, I ate rice and beans for a month to get them. When he wanted to go to a private college that cost $10,000 a year, I borrowed from the bank and spent 10 years paying it off. I told myself it was worth it. That one day, when he stood on his own 2 feet, he'd turn around and steady me the same way. But children rarely notice the hands that built the ground they walk on. After college, Bryce came home. "Just until I save up," he said. It turned into 5 years. 5 years where I kept paying every bill, cooking every meal, while he saved every penny. Then one morning he walked in smiling. "I bought a house, Mom. 300,000, paid in cash." I clapped, proud and dizzy. My son, the man I'd raised with calloused hands and borrowed dreams, had made it. But I didn't know then that he'd built that future on the unpaid rent of gratitude. When he married, I sat in the back row at the wedding, smiling for pictures beside strangers. His wife, elegant and careful with her tone, thanked me for coming. She didn't say, for raising him. Afterward, the visits slowed once a week, then once a month, always around dinner time. They came empty-handed and left full. When I asked for help with my car or medicine, Bryce's answer was always the same. "You'll figure it out, Mom." I did. I figured out that motherhood can become a debt no child intends to repay because they never saw it as a loan. And that realization, though it came late, was the first step toward my freedom. The Monday after that argument, Bryce showed up again. Same calm face, same confident rhythm. He carried a briefcase this time, as if he were visiting a client instead of his mother. "Mom," he said, laying out a neat stack of papers on my kitchen table. "This is simple. Just sign here, here, and here. It'll make things easier for both of us." I looked at the pages. Legal forms, bank authorizations, and one that made my pulse stop for a second. Power of attorney. The small print was dense, but I could still read what it meant. Total financial control. Permanent access. The right to move or close accounts without my approval. Bryce, I said slowly, tracing the first line with my finger. "This says you'll have full control over everything I own. Thanks for watching." He smiled as if I were a child confusing homework for art. "Exactly. That way I can handle everything without bothering you. It's practical." "Practical," I repeated, tasting the word like spoiled fruit. "For who?" He ignored that, slid the pen toward me. "Just sign it, Mom. It's for your own good." That phrase again. The one that men use to justify control. The one women hear right before losing something they can't get back. I picked up the pen. It felt heavier than it should. My hand trembled not from age, but from memory. I remembered all those nights working until 2 a.m. Coming home to a sleeping boy whose future I was buying piece by piece. I remembered the first time he said thank you with real meaning. Back when love hadn't yet learned to disguise itself as pity. I set the pen down. "Give me a few days," I said. "I'll read everything carefully." 1. His smile faltered. A flash of irritation crossed his face, gone almost as soon as it came. "There's nothing to think about. You trust me, don't you?" I used to," I said softly. "I used to." He blinked, but didn't answer. Gathered the papers, left them on the table like bait, and walked out without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. The documents sat where he'd left them, their black ink catching the light. Around midnight, I made tea and sat down to read every line. My heart beat faster the deeper I went. There was nothing practical about it. It was a trap disguised as help. I didn't sign. I didn't tear them up either. I left them there as a reminder, proof of how close I'd come to giving away the last thing I truly owned, myself. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do next. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to investigate. because a mother's instinct might forgive, but it never forgets. The next morning, I walked to the bank before work. The air was sharp, the kind that wakes you up faster than coffee. I told the teller I wanted to see all my transactions from the last 6 months. She smiled politely, printed the pages, and handed them across the counter. I sat on one of the plastic chairs in the corner and began to read line by line. Most were familiar groceries, electric bill, pharmacy. Then one caught my eye. A withdrawal for $1,200 made 3 months ago at a branch across town. My hands froze. I had never been there. "Can you check the details?" I asked. She typed for a moment, then looked up. "It was made using your debit card, ma'am." My card had never left my wallet, except once. 3 months earlier, Bryce had shown up unannounced while I was in the shower. I had shouted that the door was open. When I came out, he was sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone. My purse had been on the sofa beside him. A chill crawled up my neck. I thanked the teller, took the papers, and walked out into the bright morning light that suddenly felt too harsh. Back home, I opened the old metal box where I kept every receipt and bank statement from the last few years. I went through them one by one, and what I found turned my stomach. There was a credit card I didn't remember applying for $3,000 in purchases at hardware stores and home decor shops. Bryce had bought his house 2 years ago and remodeled it that same season. I called the bank that issued the card. The representative confirmed it had been opened 18 months ago under my name. "Would you like to report identity fraud?" she asked. Identity fraud. From my own son. The words didn't fit in my mouth. That night, I sat on the floor, surrounded by papers like battlefield debris. This wasn't confusion or accident. It was a pattern, a careful, deliberate theft planned over years. Tears came, quiet and hot. Not from sadness, but from understanding. I realized Bryce hadn't changed overnight. He had been taking from me, piece by piece, testing how much I would tolerate. And every time I said nothing, he learned I was easy to steal from, not because I was weak, but because I was his mother. When the tears stopped, something else rose in their place. Not forgiveness, strategy, because this war wouldn't be fought with screaming. It would be won with evidence. I didn't sleep that night. The papers covered my living room floor like a map of betrayal. Every line of ink, another wound I hadn't noticed bleeding. By dawn, I had sorted them into neat piles. One for the withdrawals, one for the fake credit card, and one for the utility account Bryce had opened in my name. Each pile was proof that my son had built his life on the ashes of my trust. When the sun came up, I took a shower, got dressed, and called the number on a newspaper ad I'd clipped months earlier, but never used. "Free legal consultations for seniors, attorney David Chung." He answered himself, his voice calm, measured, patient. I told him I needed help, but didn't want to make trouble for my son. "Mrs. Johnson," he said gently, "you're not making trouble. You're stopping it." His office smelled of paper and coffee. I handed him every document, explaining each discovery while he listened, writing notes in precise strokes. When I finished, he looked up at me. "What your son has done," he said, "is financial fraud. If you sign anything he gives you, you'll lose legal control of your money, and you'll have no recourse if he drains it all." Hearing it spoken aloud turned my stomach. I pressed my palms together to stop them from shaking. "I just wanted to believe he loved me," I whispered. "He may love you," the lawyer said quietly, but he also uses you. And that's not love, it's power. Is now attention. He handed me a checklist. Report the fraudulent card, change all passwords, request new debit cards, secure my accounts under a new address. And if you feel unsafe, he added, file for a restraining order. The words felt impossible. A restraining order against my son. But when I walked out of that office, the wind hit my face like a baptism. I was done. Pretending safety was the same as silence. That afternoon, I went straight to the bank. I closed my old account, opened a new one at a different branch across town, and transferred what little I had left. Then I changed my PINs, my passwords, everything that carried my name. When I got home, I made tea and stared at the clock. Bryce would call soon. He always called when he felt me pulling away. At 8 p.m., the phone rang. "Mom," he said, too calm. "We need to talk. Come to dinner tomorrow. We'll fix this." I looked at the compass on the table, its needle steady as my pulse. "No, Bryce," I said. "I'll be busy." "Busy with what?" "With my life," I replied. And for the first time, I meant it. The next morning, I carried the heavy folder of evidence under my arm and crossed the hall to knock on my neighbor's door. Bertha Washington had lived next to me for over 30 years. She'd seen Bryce grow from a shy boy into the man who now refused to look me in the eye. When she opened the door, her smile faded into concern. "Ellie, honey, you look like you've been fighting ghosts." "Not ghosts," I said. "Blood." She ushered me in, poured coffee, and waited while I told her everything: the stolen money, the forged credit card, the papers he wanted me to sign, the threats dressed up as concern. I spoke for nearly an hour without stopping. When I finished, Bertha sat back, silent for a long time. "I always wondered why you kept that boy fed every Friday," she said finally. "He came empty-handed, left full, and never once thanked you." But I didn't want to interfere. She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. "I'm glad you finally are. I need your help," I said. "If things get ugly, if Bryce tries to make me look confused, I'll need someone to tell the truth. Someone to say, I'm still of sound mind." Bertha's hand tightened. "You have that. And if you ever feel unsafe, you come here. I'll keep a spare key ready. 2 have 9. Her words sank deeper than comfort. They felt like armor. I hadn't realized until then how much fear I'd been carrying. Fear of being old, of being alone, of being called crazy by the very person who made me doubt myself. That night, back home, I turned my kitchen into a command center. I made copies of every document, labeled each one carefully, and placed the originals in a sealed envelope. On the front, I wrote, "In case of emergency." Then I walked across the hall and handed it to Bertha. "If anything happens to me," I told her, "give this to the police." Her face softened, but her eyes were fierce. "Nothing's going to happen, Ellie. Not to a woman who's this prepared." Later, as I brewed tea, headlights flashed through my window. Bryce's car, slowing in front of my building. My heartbeat quickened, but I didn't move. He didn't stop. The car rolled on and disappeared down the street. Maybe he was checking if I'd broken yet. I smiled into the quiet. He was right about one thing. I wasn't the same woman anymore. The frightened mother he used to manipulate was gone. In her place stood someone he'd never met, and she was waiting. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was making tea when I heard the low growl of his car outside. Tires on gravel, a door slamming, then 2 sets of footsteps climbing the stairs. Bryce never came alone anymore. He brought his wife as if she were a witness or a shield. The doorbell rang once, twice, 3 times. I didn't rush. I let him feel the weight. When I finally opened the door, I didn't step aside. I stood in the frame, blocking the entrance. "We need to talk," Bryce said. His voice clipped, already irritated. "I'm listening," I replied. "Inside, Mom," he ordered. "I'm not going to stand in the hallway. Then you'll have to learn how," I said, calm as stone. His wife rolled her eyes. "Ellie, this is ridiculous. Stop acting like we're enemies." "Yes, you're not enemies," I said evenly. "Enemies are honest about their hostility. You're thieves hiding behind family dinners." Bryce's face darkened. "How dare you? After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done to me," I interrupted. "I have the proof, Bryce. The withdrawals, the credit cards, the utility bills in my name. I know exactly how much you've stolen." 7. His mouth fell open, then snapped shut. His wife stepped forward, her tone cutting. "You can't prove that." He were 9. "Oh, but I can." I raised the folder in my hand. "And so can the lawyer handling my case. You'll both be hearing from him soon." For a second, the air between us stopped moving. Then Bryce spoke, his voice trembling with rage. "You owe me. My whole life I grew up without a father. I watched you struggle. You chose this life, Mom. You chose to stay alone. I didn't ask to be born." I felt the words like stones, but they didn't hit anymore. They fell at my feet. Harmless. "You're right," I said. "I chose to have you, and for a long time, that was the best decision I ever made. But loving you doesn't mean I'll let you destroy me." He glared, jaw tight. "You'll regret this." "No," I said quietly. "You will." His wife tugged at his arm. "Let's go, Bryce. She's not worth it." They turned and walked down the stairs without looking back. The echo of their footsteps faded, replaced by the steady ticking of my kitchen clock. When the silence settled, I exhaled slowly. It wasn't victory yet, but it was power. And for the first time in my life, that power belonged entirely to me. That night, my lawyer called to confirm the banks had validated my claims. Fraud. Identity theft. A solid case. I hung up, sat in the glow of my small lamp, and whispered to myself. He thought I was alone. He never realized I have the truth on my side. 2 days after the confrontation, the lawsuit became official. Bryce received the notification at his office, and though I wasn't there, I could almost see his face, that familiar mask of confidence cracking under the weight of real consequences. Within hours, my phone began ringing nonstop. His name flashed again and again, each call more desperate than the last. I didn't answer, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I finally understood that silence can speak louder than begging ever could. That evening, I listened to his voicemails. The first sounded calm, rehearsed. "Mom, there's been a mistake. We can fix this. Just call me back." The second was sharper. "You're overreacting. This could ruin everything I've worked for. Please think about what you're doing." By the 5th message, the mask was gone. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "You're destroying your own son." I deleted them all without a word. The next morning, The town began to whisper. Mrs. Bertha told me she overheard people at the market talking about the smart old woman who took her son to court. For once, the story being told about me wasn't pity, it was respect. Meanwhile, Bryce tried to defend himself online. He wrote long posts about toxic family relationships and setting boundaries. But lies can't outrun truth forever. His friends started asking questions, and eventually, his employer saw the legal notice. The man who once bragged about success now hid from the same eyes that used to admire him. 3 months later, he had no choice but to settle. He was ordered to repay every cent, 17,000 in stolen funds, 5,000 in damages, and full coverage of my legal fees. But what hurt him most wasn't the money. It was the final clause I insisted on a public confession. It appeared one afternoon. I made serious mistakes involving my mother's finances. I regret my actions and take full responsibility. When I read those words, I didn't feel victory. I felt peace. Because justice isn't about revenge, it's about restoration. And at that moment, I knew I had finally restored the one thing he could never steal: my self-respect. I closed my laptop, stepped outside, and let the cool wind wash over me. The storm had passed, and for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. 6 months later, the final payment arrived. The transfer notification appeared on my phone with the same sound that once meant a bill was due. Now, it meant closure. I stared at the number for a long time before smiling, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. Every dollar returned was a piece of myself, reclaimed. Bryce called that evening. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, or perhaps mercy, made me press accept. His voice was quieter than I remembered, stripped of the arrogance that used to fill every pause. "Mom," he said, "I sent the last payment. I wanted to ask if maybe we could talk sometime. Just talk." I looked out the window. The sun was melting into the horizon, turning the world the color of forgiveness, soft but not weak. "Bryce," I said, "I hope you learn from all this. I don't hate you, but I can't let you back into a life you once tried to own. Some doors stay closed because peace lives behind them." He didn't argue, just a soft exhale, like a tired child falling asleep. Then, silence. That night, I walked through my new house, small, by the sea, quiet enough to hear the wind move through the garden. I ran my fingers along the wooden frames, the ones I'd filled with photos of the people who had stayed kind when life got unkind. None of them were of Bryce. Not out of anger, but out of acceptance. I lit a candle on the kitchen table. Its flame trembled but held steady. My reflection shimmered in the glass window, older, wiser, still standing. I thought about the other mothers who might be watching this, the ones who still mistake control for care, silence for peace, sacrifice for love. And I wished I could tell them what I had learned: that loving your child doesn't mean letting them consume you, that setting boundaries is not cruelty, it's protection, that dignity is not something others can give you, it's something you reclaim the moment you decide you deserve better. I sat with my tea, listening to the sea breathe against the shore. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like someone's mother, someone's provider, someone's resource. I just felt like Eleanor Johnson, a woman who survived love's sharpest edges and came out clean on the other side. The candle burned low, steady and bright, reminding me of one simple truth: love without respect isn't love at all. And peace, once found, is worth everything it costs.